Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't make me ask twice. The words came cold through the rain, and Amara's hand froze on the crumpled note she'd been trying to retrieve from under the windshield wiper. She hadn't heard him approach, hadn't heard anything over the storm hammering Itaewon's back alleys, but now his presence filled the narrow space behind her like smoke filling a locked room. The black Mercedes she'd accidentally scraped with her bike basket gleamed under the streetlight, and the note she'd left. "I'm so sorry. Please call me to arrange payment," suddenly felt like a confession written in her own blood. "Turn around slow," the voice continued in Korean, and when she did, the man standing 3 feet away wasn't what her panic had conjured. Mid-30s, expensive coat soaked through, face too beautiful to belong to someone who spoke like he'd already decided whether you lived or died. His eyes tracked from her drenched hoodie to her second-hand bike sprawled on the wet pavement to the phone number on the note, and something shifted in his expression that made her stomach drop. "You left your number." Not a question, an accusation. "Welcome my wild hearts and truth chasers. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do happy endings that come easy here. We do love that costs everything. Your name, your family, your empire. We do the kind of passion that turns safety into a memory and comfort into a lie you can't afford. Hit that like button like you're choosing chaos over comfort. Subscribe because some love stories don't ask permission. They take prisoners. And smash that notification bell because in this world, mercy is the most dangerous thing you can show." 3 weeks earlier, Amara had moved to Seoul with a scholarship she'd fought her Jamaican-American mother for, and a dream she couldn't articulate in either language she spoke. The Yonsei University dorm room felt too small for the size of her hope, and Korea felt too big for the way. She'd been taught to shrink herself. She'd spent her first week getting lost in subway stations where nobody looked like her, eating kimbap alone in convenience stores at 2 a.m., and perfecting the art of being invisible in a country that made visibility a punishment. The bike had been a necessity. Walking everywhere in Seoul meant arriving sweaty to classes where she was already the only black girl in the room, already the subject of stares that lasted 3 seconds too long. She'd bought it used from another foreign student for 50,000 won, and it had become her escape. The way she could move through Hongdae at night without feeling every eye catalogue her difference. The way she could pretend she belonged to the neon-lit chaos instead of floating outside it. She hadn't seen the Mercedes pulling out of the underground parking garage. Hadn't seen much of anything through the rain except the glow of her favourite late-night cafe where she'd been heading to avoid her roommates. Pointed questions about why she never talked about home. Her bike basket caught the car's rear panel with a sound that made her soul leave her body. Metal on metal, a scrape that echoed in the empty street like a scream. The damage looked minor in the dark. A scratch maybe 8 inches long, barely visible against the black paint. But Amara knew minor didn't matter when the car cost more than her mother made in 2 years. She'd pulled out her notebook with shaking hands and written the note in her careful Korean, leaving her phone number because her mother had raised her to take responsibility, even when taking responsibility felt like volunteering for punishment. Then she'd run. Now, standing in this alley with rain sliding down her face and a man who looked like money and danger speaking to her like she'd committed a crime beyond property damage, Amara understood she should have kept running. "I'll pay for it," she said in Korean, the words stumbling out too fast. "I have a part-time job. I can send money every month until—" "You think this is about money?" He stepped closer, and she saw details that made her breath catch. The tattoo creeping above his collar despite Korea's laws against visible ink. The way 3 men had materialized at the alley's entrance like shadows given form. The phone in his hand displaying her notes photo like evidence at a trial. His name was Kang Minho, and Amara wouldn't learn until much later that the car belonged to an organization that made its money from nightclubs in Gangnam and protection fees in Itaewon, and business dealings that never appeared in any ledger the police could touch. Wouldn't learn that he'd spent the last hour tracking her through security footage and license plate databases because someone had damaged his property, and in his world, debts got paid in ways that didn't involve monthly installments. "I'm a student," Amara said, forcing her voice steady even as her hands shook. "I don't have much, but I'll pay. I promise." Minho studied her with an expression she couldn't read, something between curiosity and calculation, like she was a problem he hadn't decided how to solve. The rain had plastered her curls to her skull, and she knew what she looked like. Small, foreign, powerless. Everything Korea had taught her she was in the 3 weeks since she'd arrived with dreams too big for the box this country tried to put her in. "You're American." Statement, not question. His English emerged perfect and cold. "Yes." "And you thought leaving a note would fix this?" "I thought—" She stopped. Because what had she thought? That honesty mattered. That doing the right thing protected you. "I thought it was better than running away." Something flickered across his face. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he looked at her like she'd said something in a language he'd forgotten he understood. Then the expression vanished, replaced by the cold assessment that made her feel like an insect under glass. "You'll work for me," he said, "until the debt is paid." The words didn't make sense at first. Then they made too much sense. Every story she'd heard about foreign girls in Korea, who trusted the wrong person, took the wrong job, found themselves trapped in situations that had no exit signs in any language. No. The word came out smaller than she meant it, but it came out. Minho's eyebrow lifted. Behind him, one of his men shifted weight, and Amara saw her future splitting into paths that all ended badly. Run, and they'd find her. Scream, and who would come in an alley in Itaewon at midnight where foreigners were expected to be loud and dramatic? Fight, and— "No?" Minho repeated, and now he sounded almost amused. "I'll pay money. Not—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice what she feared he was asking. The amusement died. "You think I'm asking you to—" He said something in rapid Korean to his men that made them laugh, sharp and mean. When he looked back at Amara, his expression had hardened into something worse than anger. Disappointment. "I run legitimate businesses. You damaged my property. You work at one of my clubs, serving drinks, cleaning, whatever work you're capable of doing, until the damage is paid for. That's the offer. And if I say no, then I call the police. Let them handle the foreign student who destroyed private property and fled the scene." He tilted his head. "You understand how that story ends for someone like you in this country?" Amara understood. She'd understood since the first day she'd walked through Incheon Airport and felt the weight of every stare that said you don't belong here. She'd understood through every convenience store where ajumas followed her with their eyes, every subway ride where people chose to stand rather than sit beside her, every university hallway where her presence made her professors do double takes, like she'd wandered into the wrong building. Korea had been teaching her the same. Lesson on repeat. You are here on borrowed time, borrowed space, borrowed mercy. "What club?" she asked, and hated how defeated she sounded. "My club in Hongdae. You'll start tomorrow night." Minho pulled out his phone, typed something, and her phone buzzed with a message containing an address. 9 p.m. Don't be late. Then he walked away, his men following like a tide retreating, and Amara stood alone in the rain with her broken bike and her broken assumptions about how honesty got rewarded in the real world. The club was called Eclipse, tucked into a basement in Hongdae's maze of nightlife, where foreigners came to feel dangerous and Koreans came to pretend they were somewhere else. Amara arrived at 8:45 p.m. the next night, wearing black jeans and a black shirt like Minho's text had specified, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape without her. The entrance led down steep stairs into noise and darkness cut by laser lights. The bass vibrated through the walls, through her chest, through her teeth. A woman at the bottom, bleached hair, bored expression, fluent English, handed Amara an apron and pointed toward the bar. "You work coat check and clean up. Don't take drinks from customers. Don't give anyone your number. Don't fuck up." The woman looked her up and down with an expression Amara had started recognizing. The particular disdain Korea reserved for black women who dared exist in spaces not designated for their existence. "Boss says you owe him, so you work. Understand?" "I understand." The next 4 hours taught Amara that understanding and surviving were different things. She checked coats for drunk businessmen who stared too long, and university students who didn't see her at all. She cleaned up spilled drinks and broken glass, and the aftermath of violence that erupted fast and ended faster when Minho's security appeared. She existed in a space between visible and invisible, noticeable enough to be given orders, invisible enough that conversations happened around her in Korean that assumed she couldn't understand. That's how she learned Eclipse wasn't just a club. Money changed hands in bathroom stalls and private rooms. Men in expensive suits met men in streetwear and walked away with packages tucked into designer bags. Girls who looked barely 20 disappeared upstairs with men who looked like they'd bought the right to make them disappear. And through it all, Minho moved like a king through his kingdom, never drinking, never dancing, watching everything with those calculating eyes that miss nothing. He didn't speak to her that first night, didn't acknowledge her at all, but she felt him watching. On her fifth night, a man grabbed her wrist as she cleared his table. His grip was tight enough to hurt, his breath sour with whiskey, his Korean slurred but clear enough. "How much for you?" Amara froze. Around them the club pulsed with music and bodies, and nobody was looking. Nobody cared. "I'm not. I just work here. Everything in Eclipse has a price." His fingers dug deeper. "What's yours?" She tried to pull away. He yanked her closer, laughing, and then suddenly he wasn't holding her anymore. Minho had appeared like a shadow made solid, his hand wrapped around the man's wrist at an angle that made the drunk man's face go white. "She's not for sale," Minho said quietly, in Korean. "Apologize. Now." The man stammered something that might have been sorry. Minho released him with a shove that sent him stumbling back into his chair, then turned to Amara. His expression was unreadable, but his hand on her shoulder was gentle. "You okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Take 15 minutes. Go upstairs to the office. Lock the door." He pulled a key from his pocket and pressed it into her palm. "Nobody touches you here. Nobody. Understand?" Amara understood, but understanding didn't stop her hands from shaking as she climbed the stairs to Minho's office, a space that smelled like expensive cologne and old leather. She sat in the chair behind his desk and tried to steady her breathing, tried to remember why she'd come to Korea, what she'd thought she'd find here. When she came back downstairs 20 minutes later, the drunk man was gone. So was his entire group, and when she asked the bleached hair woman what happened, the woman just smiled. Boss took care of it, like he takes care of everything. 2 weeks passed, 14 nights of walking into Eclipse after evening classes, working until 2 a.m., crawling back to her dorm with her ears ringing and her clothes reeking of cigarette smoke and spilled soju. Her roommate stopped asking where she went. Her mother's texts went unanswered because what could Amara say? "I'm working for the Korean Mafia to pay off a car I scratched because I tried to do the right thing." She kept her head down, did her work, became invisible in the way she'd perfected since childhood. The art of being present without being noticed, useful without being valued. Until the night she wasn't invisible anymore. It started with a fight. 2 foreign men, American military based on their haircuts and accents, drunk and aggressive, refusing to leave when the club closed. Minho's security had them by the arms, walking them toward the exit, when one of them looked at Amara cleaning glasses behind the bar and said something that made his friend laugh, something involving the word chocolate and what they'd like to do with it. Amara had heard worse, had learned to let it slide off her like water off glass, to become stone so the words couldn't crack her. But this time, she was tired. 14 nights tired. 21 years of tired. A lifetime of being reduced to her body and her skin, and her perceived availability tired. She looked up and met the man's eyes. "You should leave." The words came out quiet, firm. In English that sounded like home, like Brooklyn, like her mother's voice, like the girl she'd been, before Korea taught her to shrink. The American smile died. "What did you say to me?" I said, Minho's voice cut through the space like a blade. "She said you're done here." He'd appeared beside Amara so quickly she hadn't seen him move. Up close she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, wood and rain. His hand rested on the bar between her and the drunk American, and though he wasn't touching her, she felt protected, claimed. "This your girl?" the American sneered, looking between them. Minho's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, a drop in temperature, a tightening of tension. His security moved closer, and suddenly the two drunk Americans looked very aware of how badly they were outnumbered. "You're leaving now," Minho said in English. "Walk or be carried. Choose fast." They walked. When the club emptied and the lights came up harsh and fluorescent, Amara cleaned in silence while Minho sat at the bar doing paperwork. She could feel him watching her again, but this time it felt different. Less like observation, more like consideration. "You spoke up." His voice made her jump. She hadn't realized he'd finished working. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I didn't say it was wrong." Minho closed his laptop. "Most people here would have let it happen. Let security handle it. You didn't." Amara didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, kept wiping down tables that were already clean. "How much do you think you still owe me?" Minho asked. She'd been tracking it in her head, counting hours against an imaginary repair bill. "Maybe another month? I don't know exactly how much the damage cost." 800,000 won. He said it like it was nothing, like he'd paid more for the shirt he was wearing. That's... She did the math fast. $800, 25 nights of work at $30 a night, except she'd only worked 14 nights. "I'm not even halfway done." Minho stood, walked around the bar until he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This close, she saw details she'd missed before. A scar through his left eyebrow, silver piercings in his right ear, dark circles under his eyes like he didn't sleep much either. "The debt is paid," he said. "What? But I haven't..." "You worked. You showed up every night, did what you were told, didn't complain. That's payment enough." He pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out. "This is what you've earned. Cash. Take it." Amara stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I don't understand." "I wanted to see what kind of person leaves a note on a car instead of running. Wanted to know if you were honest or stupid." He smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost gentle. "You're honest. And brave enough to be stupid. That's rare." She took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was more money than she'd expected, more than she'd calculated she'd earned. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve better than this." Minho gestured at Eclipse, at everything it represented. "You deserve better than working in my club because you were too honest for your own good." I can't just take this." "You can. You will." He moved past her toward the stairs, then stopped. "And Amara, don't come back tomorrow night. You're done here." She should have felt relief, should have felt gratitude. Instead, standing in the empty club with cash in her hands and the sudden absence of structure in her future, Amara felt something else entirely. Loss. 3 days later, she saw him again. Not at Eclipse, at a cafe in Hongdae she'd been going to since her first week in Seoul, the one place she'd found that made decent coffee and didn't stare when she walked in. She was studying Korean vocabulary, her textbook spread across the small table, when a shadow fell across the page. "This seat taken?" Minho didn't wait for an answer before sitting down across from her. He had his own coffee, black, no sugar, and that same unreadable expression that made her feel like he was solving an equation she couldn't see. "Are you following me?" Amara asked, and meant it as a joke, but it came out too serious. "No, I come here sometimes. Quiet." He glanced at her textbook. "How's school?" "Fine. Good." She closed the book, suddenly self-conscious about the notes in the margins, her own handwriting trying to capture pronunciations that felt impossible. "How's business?" "Profitable." He took a sip of coffee. "Boring." Before Amara could respond, the cafe door opened and 3 Korean college students walked in, girls around her age, designer bags and perfect makeup. One of them saw Minho and her face lit up with recognition, then immediately shuttered when she saw Amara sitting across from him. The girl whispered something to her friends. All three stared. Amara had learned to read these looks. The calculation, the judgment, the very specific disgust Korea, reserved for black women who dared sit across from Korean men like they had the right. "We should go," Minho said quietly, standing. "You don't have to. I want to." He held out his hand. Amara took it, and as they walked out past the three girls, she heard the Korean words whispered like poison. Yanggongju, Western whore. The word Korea used for women who slept with foreign soldiers, now weaponized against her for sitting in a cafe with a man whose hand felt warm in hers. Outside, Minho's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry." For what? Their racism? For the fact that this, he gestured between them, will always be hard here. Harder than it should be. "I didn't come to Korea for easy," Amara said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "I came here to stop being invisible. Seems like I'm succeeding." Minho looked at her for a long moment, then laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. "You're incredible. You know that." "I'm tired and angry and homesick," Amara corrected. "But I'm still here." "Yeah," his thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You are. If you're still here, you already know this isn't just a story. It's someone's life. Maybe even yours." They started meeting at the cafe twice a week, then 3 times. Then Amara stopped pretending the cafe was the reason and admitted she was looking for excuses to see him. Minho admitted the same. They walked through Hongdae at night when Amara couldn't sleep, and Minho was done with whatever business kept him awake until 3 a.m. They spoke in a mixture of Korean and English, both of them stumbling, both of them patient with each other's mistakes. He told her about growing up as the youngest son in a family where violence was currency and loyalty was survival. She told him about Brooklyn, about her mother's fear when she'd announced she was moving to Korea, about feeling caught between black enough for America and too black for Korea. 6 weeks after she'd stopped working at Eclipse, Minho took her to a pojangmasha in Itaewon, a street tent restaurant where they served soju and fried food, and nobody cared who was eating with whom. They were on their second bottle when Amara asked the question that had been building in her chest, like pressure. "What are we doing?" Minho looked at her, his expression serious. "What do you want us to be doing?" "I want..." She stopped, because wanting felt dangerous. "I want to know if this is real, or if I'm just interesting to you because I'm different. You are different. But that's not why I keep showing up." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You make me feel like I'm more than what my family made me. Like I could be someone who deserves quiet mornings and honest conversations instead of violence and strategy." "You could be," Amara said softly. "Could I?" His smile was sad. "You don't know what I've done, what I still do." "Then tell me." He did. Not everything. There were limits to honesty when honesty could destroy her, but enough. Enough about protection rackets and territorial disputes and the kinds of negotiations that happened with baseball bats in back alleys. Enough that Amara understood the man sitting across from her had blood on his hands, even if she couldn't see it. "I should walk away," she said when he finished. "You should." "But I won't." "Why not?" "Because everybody in my life has only ever seen what I am. Black, American, foreign, other. You see who I am. You see the brave and the scared and the stubborn all at once." She squeezed his hand. "That's worth the risk." Minho kissed her for the first time that night, outside the pojangmacha with Itaewon's neon lights painting them in purple and gold. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious and breakable, and when they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said. "Probably. People will judge us. My world, your world, Korea. Let them. My family, I don't care about your family." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I care about you. Is that enough?" For 3 heartbeats, he didn't answer. Then, "It has to be." The first month of actually being together felt like learning a new language. one made of stolen kisses between his business meetings and her classes, late-night phone calls when he couldn't sleep, mornings when she woke up to find him already awake, watching her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. But Korea had opinions. Her roommate, a Korean-American girl from LA, who'd always been friendly, started leaving Christian pamphlets on Amara's desk. Pamphlets about purity and God's design for relationships, with specific sections highlighted. When Amara finally confronted her, the girl's face twisted with something ugly. "I'm trying to help you. Korean men like him don't marry girls like you. They use you and move on." She said it like she was being kind. "I've seen it before. You're just a phase." Amara moved out 3 days later, finding a tiny studio in Itaewon that cost too much, but came with the freedom to exist without judgment. Minho helped her move her things, all 2 suitcases of them. And when he saw how small the space was, how bare the walls, he looked at her with something like pain. "You left your dorm because of me. I left because she was a bigot hiding behind Bible verses. You're just the excuse she used." Amara set down her bags. "Besides, this is mine. First place that's actually mine since I got here. It's tiny. It's perfect." He stayed that night, and the next. And soon his clothes were mixed with hers in the small closet, and his toothbrush sat next to hers in the bathroom. And Amara learned what it felt like to build a life with someone, instead of just borrowing space in theirs. But the peace didn't last. It shattered on a Tuesday night in November, 3 months into them being officially together. Amara was walking home from the library, later than she should have been, but finals were coming and Korean language exams didn't care that her brain felt full. The street was mostly empty, the kind of soul quiet that felt almost like peace. Then a car pulled up beside her. Black. Expensive. Not Minho's Mercedes, but close enough to make her pulse jump. 2 men got out. "You're the American girl," one of them said in Korean. "The one with Kang Minho." Amara's throat went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie. We've seen you together." The man stepped closer, and Amara saw the calculation in his eyes. The same calculation she'd seen in Minho's that first night, but colder, meaner. "You're going to give him a message. I don't. Tell him Park Jun-ho says his territory in Hongdae isn't his anymore. Tell him if he wants to discuss it, he knows where to find us." The man's smile promised violence. "And tell him if we see you again, we'll assume you're involved. You understand what that means for foreign girls in Korea?" They got back in the car and drove away, leaving Amara standing on the empty street with her phone clutched in her hand and fear crawling up her spine like ice. She called Minho. He answered on the first ring. "Amara? Someone just... they said..." Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "Where are you?" She told him. He was there in 8 minutes, pulling up in the Mercedes she'd scraped 4 months ago, getting out before the car fully stopped. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up to the streetlight, checking for damage. "Did they touch you?" "No. They gave me a message. About Park Jun-ho and Hongdae and... Get in the car. Minho. Now Amara, please." She got in the car. He drove in silence through streets she didn't recognize, his jaw tight, his hands rigid on the steering wheel. They ended up in Gangnam at a high-rise building with security that didn't ask questions when Minho pulled into underground parking. His apartment was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, minimal, the kind of place that felt more like a hotel than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's endless lights. Furniture that looked designed rather than lived in. "You'll stay here tonight," Minho said, already pulling out his phone to make calls she couldn't hear. "I have class tomorrow. Amara." He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. "Park Jun-ho runs trafficking networks in Itaewon. He sees you as leverage against me. If I let you go back to your apartment tonight, I might not see you again. So you're staying here where I know you're safe, and tomorrow we figure out how to handle this." The reality of what she'd stumbled into hit her all at once. "This is because of me. Because you've been spending time with me. This is because Junho's been looking for an excuse to push into my territory. And you gave him one. Minho's expression softened. But I don't regret you. I regret that knowing me put you in danger. Maybe I should go back to America. Is that what you want? She didn't know. Korea had given her loneliness and stares, and the exhausting navigation of existing between worlds. But it had also given her this: late-night convenience store runs and vocabulary lessons over coffee, and a man who looked at her courage and called it brave instead of foolish. I don't know what I want anymore, Amara admitted. Minho crossed the space between them, moving slowly like she might bolt. When he touched her face, his thumb brushed across her cheekbone with a gentleness that made her chest ache. I know what I want, he said quietly. I want you safe. I want you in Korea, in Seoul, in my life. I want mornings where I wake up and know you're still here. His voice dropped. But more than anything, I want you to have a choice. Real choice, not the kind where danger decides for you. What if I choose you? Then you need to understand what that means. My life isn't safe. My business isn't legal. People like Junho will always see you as a weakness to exploit. He took a breath. And Korea will never make it easy for us. You know that. She did know. Had known since the first time she'd felt the weight of stares in a convenience store. Since every Korean auntie who'd looked at her like pollution. Since her old roommate's carefully polite questions about whether Amara was really dating Minho or just. The unfinished implications were always the same. Black women and Korean men. Fetish and fantasy. Never real love. Never the kind of thing families blessed or society accepted. I'm tired of easy, Amara said. Easy left me back in Brooklyn, where I fit in boxes people understood. I came here for hard. I just didn't know it would be this hard. Minho kissed her then. Not gentle, not careful, but like he'd been holding back for months, and her words had broken whatever restraint he'd been clinging to, his hands in her hair, her back against the window, Seoul, glittering behind her like a promise or a threat, or both. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I'll handle Junho, he said, but you need to be smart. No more walking alone at night. No more library sessions that end after dark. You go to class, you come straight to my place or yours, and you call me every time you move between locations. That's not living. That's hiding. That's surviving until I can make you safe again. Amara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence and her right to exist in Seoul, without being controlled by fear or men or the danger of loving the wrong person. But the look in Minho's eyes stopped her. The desperate fear of someone who'd already calculated how many ways he could lose her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The next week, Minho moved like a storm through Hongdae. Amara didn't see most of it. He kept her deliberately separate from the violence, but she heard about it. Whispers in the university hallways from students who frequented clubs in Hongdae. News reports about gang violence that never named names but described territories shifting like tectonic plates. Eclipse changed hands, then changed back. A restaurant that had been paying protection to Junho suddenly closed for renovations. 3 of Junho's men ended up in the hospital with injuries the police didn't investigate too closely. And through it all, Minho came home to her. To the Itaewon studio she'd kept even though she spent most nights in Gangnam, with bruised knuckles and exhaustion etched into his face. She cleaned his wounds without asking questions, made him eat even when he said he wasn't hungry, held him when he finally let himself be held. I'm trying to make you safe, he said one night, his voice raw. But every move I make puts more targets on your back. If Junho can't get to me directly, he'll come for you. And I can't let that happen. So what do we do? I don't know. And the admission seemed to cost him everything. 2 weeks later, Junho made his move. Amara was at Yonsei between classes, sitting in the student center with her laptop open and headphones in. She didn't notice the men until they were right beside her. 2 of them. Dressed like students but moving like soldiers. Amara Williams? One of them said in English. Every alarm in her body went off. Who's asking? Someone who wants to talk. The man smiled, and it was the smile from that night on the street. Park Junho would like to have coffee with you. just a conversation. I'm not going anywhere with you. That wasn't a request. The second man's hand went to his jacket, and Amara saw the outline of something that could have been a gun. Around them, students chatted and studied and lived their normal lives, oblivious to the violence crystallizing in their midst. Amara's hands shook as she closed her laptop. If I go with you, you don't hurt anyone here. Nobody has to get hurt. This is just coffee. They walked her out of the student center into the November cold. A black sedan waited at the curb. Different car, same threat. One of the men opened the back door, and Amara climbed in because what other choice did she have? The drive took 15 minutes. They ended up in Gangnam, at a cafe so expensive it didn't have prices on the menu. Park Jun-ho sat at a corner table, mid-40s, expensive suit. The kind of face that belonged to someone who'd stopped pretending violence wasn't his native language. Sit, he said in Korean, gesturing to the chair across from him. Amara sat. Behind her, the two men took positions at the door. You're wondering why you're here, Jun-ho continued, switching to English that was nearly perfect. Let me be clear. This isn't about hurting you. This is about making Kang Minho understand his position. I'm not part of his business. You're part of his life. That makes you part of this. Jun-ho sipped his coffee. He's been interfering. In Hongdae. My territory. And he's doing it because he thinks having you makes him invincible, makes him willing to start wars he can't win. So talk to him, not me. I am talking to him. Through you. Jun-ho leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Minho that Hongdae is mine. He can keep Itaewon, keep his little clubs in Gangnam, but Hongdae belongs to me. If he agrees, you stay safe. If he doesn't... Jun-ho shrugged. Well, foreign students disappear in Korea all the time. Visa issues, deportations, accidents. Amara's chest felt tight. You're threatening to kill me if he doesn't give up his territory. I'm offering you a chance to save his life and yours. Because if this war continues, one of you won't survive it. Probably both. Junho's smile was cold. You seem smart. Make the smart choice. Convince him to let Hongdae go. They drove her back to campus and left her standing outside the student center with her laptop clutched to her chest in terror, making her breath come shallow. She called Minho from the bathroom, her voice shaking so badly she could barely form words. He came to get her himself. No driver. His face a mask of barely controlled rage. In the car, she told him everything. The men, the cafe, Junho's ultimatum. He threatened you, Minho said, and his voice was so quiet it felt like the moment before an explosion. He put his hands on you and threatened you. Minho, maybe he's right. Maybe Hongdae isn't worth. This isn't about Hongdae. The car swerved slightly as his control cracked. This is about him thinking he can use you to control me. And if I give in now, every other organization in Seoul will know that threatening you is how they get what they want. So what do we do? Minho's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I end this. Tonight. What does that mean? It means you go to my apartment, you lock the door, and you don't leave until I come back. Minho, please, Amara, please just let me. Keep you safe. She went to his apartment, locked the door, spent 6 hours pacing and crying and checking her phone every 30 seconds for news that he was dead or arrested or gone. Seoul glittered outside the windows like a city that didn't care about the violence happening in its shadows. Minho came back at 4 a.m., blood on his shirt that wasn't his, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He walked straight to Amara and pulled her into his arms. It's done, he said into her hair. Junho's in the hospital. His men know if they come near you again, they die. It's done. Did you... She couldn't finish the question. No, but I wanted to. He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were haunted. I wanted to kill him for touching you, for threatening you, and if he tries again, I will. Amara should have been horrified, should have seen this as the moment to walk away, to run back to America where love didn't require this level of violence to survive. Instead, she kissed him, hard and desperate, tasting blood and fear and the terrible relief of him being alive. They made love on the living room floor because neither of them could wait for the bedroom, because they needed to confirm they were both still breathing, still here, still choosing each other despite everything. After, lying tangled together with the lights of Seoul watching through the windows, Minho spoke into the darkness. "My family wants to meet you." Amara's stomach dropped. "What?" "My father called, said if I'm willing to start a war over you, you must be serious. He wants to meet the woman who made me choose her over peace." Minho's laugh was bitter. "He doesn't know yet that you're black, American, everything they'll hate." "Then don't tell them. Don't make me meet them. I have to. If I hide you, they'll think you're a weakness I'm ashamed of. If I bring you, at least they'll know I'm choosing you with my eyes open. And when they reject me, reject us, then I'll know where I stand, with them too." The family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. 5 days for Amara to panic, to practice her Korean, to imagine every possible way it could go wrong. Minho tried to prepare her, told her about his mother's devotion to family reputation, his father's calculation of every relationship in terms of business advantage, his older brother's disdain for anything that complicated the family's carefully maintained image. "They're going to hate me," Amara said the night before, standing in front of Minho's mirror trying to decide what to wear to your own execution. "They're going to try to make you feel small," Minho corrected, coming up behind her. "Don't let them. You've survived Korea for 5 months. You can survive one dinner." The Hanak in Bukchon was beautiful. Traditional Korean architecture, careful gardens, the kind of generational wealth that came from businesses that operated in shadows, but presented like light. Minho's hand was tight on Amara's as they walked through the gate, and she felt his tension like a living thing. His mother answered the door. Mid-50s, elegant hanbok, a face that might have been kind before it learned to weaponize politeness. She looked at Amara, and something shuddered in her expression. Not surprise, not shock, just immediate, total rejection. "You brought a guest," she said in Korean, not to Amara but to Minho. "I brought the woman I love," Minho replied. "Mother, this is Amara Williams. Amara, my mother, Kang Minho." Amara bowed, perfect 90 degrees, using the formal Korean she'd practiced. "It's an honor to meet you." His mother's return bow was minimal, dismissive. "Come in. Your father is waiting." The dinner was conducted entirely in rapid Korean that Amara could barely follow. Minho's father, stern, calculating, clearly the source of Minho's intensity, asked questions that felt like interrogations. Where was she from? What did her family do? How did they meet? Each answer seemed to confirm something he already believed about her inadequacy. Minho's older brother, Minjun, didn't even pretend politeness. He looked at Amara like she was something stuck to his shoe, and when he finally spoke directly to her, his English was deliberately slow. "You must find Korea very different from America. So much more structured, traditional." "I find it challenging," Amara replied carefully. "But meaningful challenges are worth the difficulty." "Even when they're impossible?" His smile was cruel. "Some things don't translate across cultures. Some gaps can't be bridged." "Minjun," Minho's voice held a warning. But his brother continued, switching back to Korean and speaking to his father like Amara wasn't there. "She's a phase. You know how Minho is. Always searching for something to make him feel different, special. Remember that Japanese girl in university? This is the same thing." "I'm sitting right here," Amara said in Korean, and the table went silent. "And I'm not a phase. I'm a person who loves your son, who he loves back, and whether you respect that or not doesn't change it." Minho's mother's face went white. "You speak Korean?" "Not well, but enough to understand when I'm being insulted in my presence." "Amara," Minho started, but his father cut him off. "She has courage. I'll give her that." The elder Kang studied Amara with new interest. "But courage doesn't make her suitable. Our family has a reputation, connections, expectations. You understand what you're asking my son to give up?" "I'm not asking him to give up anything," Amara said. "He's choosing. There's a difference." And if we tell him to choose us or you? Minho stood, his chair scraping loud in the silence. Then I choose her. Every time, no question. His mother made a sound like she'd been struck. You would abandon your family for this girl? I would abandon a family that can't accept the woman I love. Yes. Minho's hand found Amara's shoulder. I've spent my entire life being what you needed, doing what the business required, becoming the son you wanted instead of the person I am. But I'm done. You either accept Amara or you lose me. Choose. The silence stretched so long Amara thought she might break from the pressure of it. Then Minho's father spoke, his voice heavy with something that might have been disappointment or might have been grief. If you walk out that door with her, you're out of the business, out of the family. No protection, no resources, no name. I understand. Minho, think about what you're doing, his mother pleaded. This isn't love. This is infatuation. It will pass, and then what will you have? Nothing. I'll have her. That's not nothing. Minho pulled Amara to her feet. And I'll have myself back. The version that doesn't belong to you or the business or the violence. That's worth everything you're threatening to take away. They walked out together, through the beautiful hanok and the careful gardens, out into Bukchon's, traditional streets where tourists took photos of Korea's preserved past. Behind them, Minho's family didn't follow. In the car, Minho's hands shook on the steering wheel. I just lost my family, he said, and his voice cracked. I know. Amara took his hand. I'm sorry. Don't be. This was my choice. He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with tears he wouldn't let fall. You're my choice. What happens now? Now I figure out how to build a life that's actually mine. With you, if you still want that. I want that, Amara said, even if it's hard, even if Korea never accepts us, even if... He kissed her before she could finish, and it tasted like salt and fear, and the terrible freedom of having nothing left to lose. The next 2 months were war, but a different kind than before. Minho's father made good on his threat, cut him off from the business, from family resources, from the protection that came with the Kang name. Suddenly the men who'd once followed Minho's orders treated him like a stranger. The territories he'd controlled were redistributed. The apartment in Gangnam, family property, became off limits. They moved into Amara's tiny studio in Itaewon, all their possessions crammed into a space barely big enough for one person, let alone two. Minho found work managing a restaurant owned by a college friend who didn't care about family drama or gang politics. The pay was a fraction of what he'd earned before, but it was honest and it was his. But Korea wasn't done punishing them. Amara's university received an anonymous complaint about her visa status, a claim that she was working illegally, violating the terms of her student visa. It wasn't true, but the investigation took 3 weeks of stress and paperwork and interviews, where she had to prove she belonged in Korea when everything about the country said she didn't. Then her mother called. Amara almost didn't answer. They hadn't spoken properly since she'd admitted she was dating Minho, since her mother had screamed down the phone about throwing her life away for a man, about Korea using her up and spitting her out, about coming home before it was too late. But she answered. Baby, her mother said, and the word cracked with tears. Please come home. Mama, someone called me, a woman, said she was Minho's mother, said terrible things about what kind of girl dates a gangster, about how I raised you wrong, about how you need to leave Korea before you embarrass yourself further. Her mother's voice broke. Is it true? Is he really in the Mafia? Amara closed her eyes. It's complicated. It's not complicated. You're my daughter. You had a full scholarship, a future, and you're throwing it away for some man who's going to get you killed or arrested or... I love him, Mama. Love isn't enough when it's destroying your life. My life isn't destroyed. It's different. Hard. But mine. Amara took a shaky breath. I know you don't understand. I know you're scared. But I'm not coming home. I'm staying here with him. And we're building something that's ours. Then you're choosing him over me too. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. None of this is fair. You went to Korea to find yourself and you lost yourself instead. The Amara I raised wouldn't. The Amara you raised was terrified of taking up space, of being too much, too loud, too black, too anything. Amara's voice rose. Korea didn't make me small, Mama. It taught me I was tired of being invisible. And Minho sees me. All of me. Even the parts I didn't know I had. Her mother was crying now. Open sobs that made Amara's chest hurt. If you stay there, if you stay with him, I can't watch you destroy yourself. I can't. Then don't watch. But I'm not leaving. Then we're done. You hear me? If you choose him, we're done. The line went dead. Amara sat on the floor of the studio, phone in her lap, and cried until Minho came home and found her there. He didn't ask what happened, just held her while she shook and grieved for a mother who loved her enough to let her go, but not enough to understand why she needed to stay. That night, lying in the dark with Minho's arms around her, Amara whispered, "I lost my mother today." "I know." His voice was rough. "I lost mine too. We lost them because they can't see past what we look like together to who we are." Was it worth it? He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Ask me again in a year. Ask me when we've built something they can't touch or judge or destroy. Ask me when we're happy despite them, not because of them. And if we're not happy, then we'll at least know we tried, on our terms, in our way." He kissed her temple. That has to count for something. Winter hit Seoul hard that year, the kind of cold that made Amara's bones ache, that turned the walk from the subway to their studio into an endurance test. Money was tight, tighter than it had ever been. Minho's restaurant job barely covered. Rent and Amara's tutoring income fluctuated with the school calendar. They ate convenience store meals more often than not, skipped heating in the apartment to save on bills, wore layers until they looked like stuffed animals. But they had each other, and some nights that felt like enough. Until Park Jun-ho made his final move. It happened on a Tuesday in December. Amara was walking home from a tutoring session, her breath visible in the freezing air, when she noticed the car following her. Black sedan, tinted windows. The same car that had taken her to that cafe months ago. She started walking faster. The car kept pace. She ran. The car stopped and two men got out, and Amara knew this wasn't going to end with another warning. She screamed, hoping someone would hear, someone would care. But Itaewon at 8 p.m. was a chaos of noise, and nobody turned their heads for one more foreign girl yelling. Hands grabbed her arms. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, sweet-smelling and wrong. Her vision swam, darkness creeping in at the edges, and her last conscious thought was, "Minho won't know where I am." She woke up in a warehouse. Concrete floor, high ceilings, the smell of oil and rust. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, and Park Jun-ho sat on a chair 10 feet away, looking at her like she was a problem he was about to solve. "You're awake. Good." He stood, walked closer. "Let me explain your situation. Kang Minho humiliated me, put me in the hospital, took territory I'd already claimed, and he did it all for you." Junho crouched down until they were eye level. "So you're going to call him. Tell him if he wants you back, he comes alone. No security, no weapons, just him. He'll know it's a trap. Of course he will, but he'll come anyway. Because men like him, men stupid enough to love someone like you, they always come." Junho pulled out Amara's phone from his pocket. "Call him." Her hand shook as he held the phone to her ear, as it rang once, twice. "Amara," Minho's voice, tight with concern because she never called this late. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Junho took the phone back. "Kang Minho, you have 1 hour. Come to the warehouse off Dongho Row, the old textile factory. Come alone or I start removing pieces of your girlfriend until there's nothing left worth saving." He hung up, looked at Amara with something almost like pity. "He'll come. And when he does, We'll settle this properly. You're going to kill him. Yes. Junho said it simply, like commenting on the weather. I'm going to make him watch me hurt you first, so he understands what it costs to cross me. Then I'm going to kill him. Then I'm going to let you go, because you're not worth the trouble of dealing with foreign police. You'll go back to America and forget this ever happened. I won't forget. You will. Because the alternative is spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll change my mind about letting you live. He walked back to his chair. Now we wait. Minho arrived in 43 minutes. Amara heard the warehouse door open, heard his footsteps echo on concrete, and then there he was. Bruised from the fight he must have had to get here. Breathing hard, eyes scanning until they found her. Amara. How touching, Junho interrupted, and suddenly 6 of his men appeared from the shadows. The hero arrives to save his lady, except you're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Minho's jaw tightened. Let her go. This is between us. No, this is about teaching lessons. Junho nodded to one of his men, who moved toward Amara with a knife that caught the warehouse's dim light. Lesson 1. Love is weakness. The knife pressed against Amara's throat and she stopped breathing. Lesson 2, Junho continued. Crossing me has consequences you can't afford to pay. I'll give you whatever you want, Minho said, and his voice was desperate in a way Amara had never heard. Money, territory, anything. Just let her go. What I want is for you to understand your place, and sometimes understanding requires pain. The knife pressed harder, and Amara felt blood trickle warm down her neck. Minho made a sound like an animal in a trap, taking a step forward that made 4 guns point at his chest. Don't, Junho warned. Move again, and they shoot. Stay still, and maybe she only loses a finger instead of her life. What happened next happened fast. The warehouse door exploded inward. Police flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands in Korean that echoed off the walls. Junho's men scattered, some dropping their guns, some trying to run. The man with the knife jerked it away from Amara's throat in his panic, and she threw herself sideways as gunfire erupted. Minho was moving before the first shot finished echoing, crossing the space to Amara, cutting her zip ties with a pocket knife he wasn't supposed to have, pulling her behind a concrete pillar as chaos consumed the warehouse. Are you hurt? His hands were on her face, her neck, checking the cut that was already clotting. No. How did the police? I called them before I came. Told them Park Junho had kidnapped a foreign national. His smile was grim. Sometimes the law is useful. The raid ended with Junho in handcuffs and half his organization arrested. Later, Amara would learn that Minho had been feeding information to an anti-gang task force for weeks. Insurance, he'd called it. A way to protect her without starting another war he couldn't win. But in the moment, sitting in an ambulance while a paramedic cleaned the cut on her throat and police took statements, all Amara could think was, we survived. Minho sat beside her, his hand tight on hers, and when the police finished with their questions and the ambulance released her, and they finally made it back to their tiny studio in Itaewon, they collapsed onto the floor just inside the door. I thought I'd lost you, Minho said into her hair. You didn't. I could have, if the police had been 30 seconds later, but they weren't. Amara pulled back to look at him. We're here. We're alive. That has to be enough. Is it? Enough? His eyes searched hers. Because I keep putting you in danger. My past, my choices, my enemies. They keep finding you. And I don't know how to stop that except to let you go. Don't. Her voice was fierce. Don't you dare let me go because you think it's noble or protective. I chose this. I chose you. All of it. The danger, the judgment, the violence. I chose it with my eyes open. Why? The question sounded torn from somewhere deep. Why would you choose this? Because loving you taught me I was brave enough to fight for what I wanted instead of settling for what I was told to accept. Because you make me feel like I belong somewhere, even if that somewhere is just this tiny studio with you. She cupped his face. Because some love is worth the cost, Minho, and you are worth every single thing I've paid to be here." He kissed her then, and it tasted like blood, and tears, and survival. Like a promise neither of them knew if they could keep, but both of them were willing to die trying. 6 months later, on a warm evening in June, they walked through Itaewon hand in hand. The neighborhood had become theirs in a way nowhere else in Seoul ever would. The place where mixed couples could exist without constant stares, where foreigners and Koreans blended into something new, where belonging meant choosing your people instead of being chosen by blood or nationality. Minho had gotten promoted to assistant manager at the restaurant. Amara had graduated and found a full-time job teaching English at a private academy. They'd moved into a slightly bigger apartment, still in Itaewon, still small, but with room for a table and a bed that didn't fold against the wall. They still got stared at, still faced whispers and judgment and the occasional racist comment that made Amara's blood boil. Korea hadn't changed its mind about them, but they'd changed their minds about needing Korea's permission. "My father called yesterday," Minho said as they walked. "First time in 7 months. Amara's heart jumped. What did he want? "To tell me Park Jun-ho's trial is next week. He's facing 20 years. Minho paused. "And to ask if I was happy." "What did you say?" "I said yes, and he said," Minho's voice caught. "He said that was all he'd ever really wanted for me. He just hadn't known happiness could look like this. Does that mean... I don't know what it means. Maybe one day they'll accept us. Maybe they won't. But I stopped needing them to." He squeezed her hand. "I have you. I have work I don't hate. I have a life that's mine. That's enough." They stopped outside a convenience store, the same one Amara had eaten kimbap in alone during her first week in Seoul, back when she'd thought loneliness was the price of chasing dreams. "Do you regret it?" Minho asked. "Leaving that note on my car?" Amara thought about everything that had followed. The fear, the violence, the losses that still ached like phantom limbs. Her mother's silence, his family's rejection, the constant navigation of a country that didn't want them to exist together. But she also thought about late-night convenience store runs and vocabulary lessons over coffee. Thought about learning she was brave enough to demand space instead of borrowing it. Thought about a man who'd chosen her over everything he'd been raised to value, and who she'd chosen right back. "No," she said, "I don't regret it. Because that note brought me here. To you. To this version of myself who's tired and broke and sometimes scared, but who's also more herself than she's ever been." Minho pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "Good. Because I'd find that car and scratch it again just to relive every moment that followed." Above them, Seoul's neon lights flickered on as evening turned to night. The city that had judged them and tested them and tried to break them apart now lit their way forward. Not with acceptance, but with the simple fact of their continued existence in it. Some love stories don't ask permission from anyone. Not families, not countries, not the careful rules about who deserves to love whom. They just ask one question. Are you brave enough to leave a note on the car instead of running into the safety of being invisible? If you've ever felt caught between worlds, you belong here. Subscribe so these stories keep finding the people who need them. Because Amara left a note that night in the rain, not knowing it would cost her mother safety, the easy path home. She left it because her mother taught her honesty mattered even when honesty volunteered you for pain. And what it brought her was this: a man who chose her over empires, a life that felt like hers instead of borrowed, a belonging that existed not despite the difficulty, but because of it. If this story found you when you needed it, pass it on to someone who's still searching for theirs.